Good afternoon. It's great to be here, and what I wanted to talk about today is how we can increase our engagement with digital products and services through using behavioral science, or what we call behavioral design. So we'll first start with setting the context. I think many of you already know that households are financially vulnerable. And so most households would struggle paying a bill if their paycheck was delayed even 1 week. And so in this context, digital financial service providers and fintechs have an enormous opportunity, which I'm sure we all here know the value of the increased functionality, the affordability, and the decreased costs. The challenge, of course, is this value isn't playing out in the market quite yet. We're still lagging in terms of adoption and usage, in some areas more than others. And even though certain segments have greater use of smartphones and other technology, we're still seeing the gap across all different segments. And so much of this is behavioral. And what I decide to do, or the decisions I decide to make, are always influenced by the environment in which I'm in, the context that surrounds me, the situation. And so using good design with behavioral science, we can design things that help people follow through on what they intend to do. And we see that bad design, people can end up doing something that looks a little different than what they may have actually intended to do. And so this is what we do at Ideas 42. We're a global nonprofit, and we solve really tough problems in a number of areas using the behavioral sciences. So this is any science that has to do with the study of how people behave and make decisions. So behavioral economics, social psychology, cognitive science, and others. And so we do this in about 35 countries with a team of over 100 people working with a fantastic group of academics. We've got about 75 academic affiliates who partner with us and advise us on the different projects. And we use a very particular methodology. And so you can almost think about behavioral design as a combination of a human-centered approach, but with science behind it. So more of an R&D type approach. So everything that we do, we think about what are the insights we know about human behavior from the literature. What does it say about how we'll act in a given situation? Then we look at what other known behavioral interventions, things that have already happened in the field that have been tested, what's working, and how can I use that in what I'm doing and what I'm creating? And then everything that we do, we experiment. And we do this for two reasons. One, while our tendencies as humans are pretty similar across the globe, so what a behavioral bias may show up in one part of the world, it's going to probably show up in another. But we know that there are lots of simple differences in context that happen from one city to another, from one country to another. Even the same company could have slightly different processes or slightly different experience that the users go through. And so you want to make sure that it's working well as you bring this model, this product, to new areas. The second reason we always experiment is we're always trying to do better. How can we create more value, more impact, lower cost? And experimentation lets us know because we know what the answer is by using valuable methods like randomized controlled trials, A/B testing, and other methodologies such as that. And so coming back to designing for the digital financial space, we often have this idea that if we build it, people will naturally flock to what we're doing, right? And so you talk to so many different organizations and they say, well, I've created something with enormous value. If people just knew about it, certainly things would be different. And this is really based on a model of behavior that's more like traditional economics. And so this is the idea that people very carefully scan the market to figure out what their options are. They then carefully weigh the costs and benefits, almost like a robot. Sometimes I compare them to Spock from Star Trek. And then whatever they decide, based on that, they then adopt the product, they continue using it. It's all a very neat chain of events. But the behavioral model of how people do things really looks quite different. There are all these things that happen in our context that affect our decisions and our actions. For example, what are other people doing? How complex is my decision? Do I have a deadline in which to finish it? And so when we think about digital engagement, particularly for digital adoption, we look at things like, does the product even enter my field of vision? Does the product appear trustworthy to me? Can I understand and compare options between this and something else? And does the product facilitate my follow-through to take it up? And then once I take it up, am I going to use it? So does the product grab my attention at the right time? Does the product earn my trust at every interaction? Every time I use it, it gives me confidence? And does it facilitate follow-through? So am I continuing to use it and need it and remember to use it at the right time? And so we've identified 4 key areas in which behavioral design can help digital engagement. So they're here: capturing attention, inspiring trust and confidence, simplifying the decision, and facilitating action. And we've taken these and we've created what we call a digital playbook. It lives on our website at ideas42.org, Behavioral Design for Digital Financial Services. And on this, we walk through each of the different areas. What are the challenges? What are the warning signs that this may be happening with your product? And what's the science behind why this is happening? We also share some design principles. So each of them have a few design principles of what you can do immediately to turn it around. And so today, instead of wowing you with all these insights about human behavior and the strange things that we do, what I wanted to do is walk you through some of these principles so you leave here with some immediate tips of things that you can be using right away with your products and services. So we'll start with capturing attention. And when we think about capturing attention, we have to put aside the idea that people are actively scanning the market for a solution, right? That's generally not the case. And rather, how can we put ourselves in front of people at the right time and make it easy for them to take it up? And so the design principle for this I'm going to share with you today is aligning with a moment of need. So how do we find customers when they actually need, or clients when they actually need our help? And this is a project that we did with a credit union, and they were struggling to get more clients to start using mobile deposits. And the tricky thing about aligning with a moment of need with checks is, when does your client get the check? Are you going to be able to capture them between actually having a check and going to the branch? And so here we actually created a moment of need. So we did 2 things with this intervention design. We sent them a mailer, and in that mailer they received a check for $5 that they could only get if they used mobile deposit. And then we created very simple instructions on how to use mobile deposit. So we gave them a reason to try mobile deposit and an easy way to follow through and do it. Now, I want to take a minute and just talk about incentives, because I think there's a lot of different ideas around incentives. And we think of $5 as something like a micro incentive. So micro incentives include small prizes, small monetary amounts, even lotteries. Because traditionally we think of any sort of incentive, even micro incentives, as something that's changing our calculation. So, oh, will I do this now because now I might win the lottery, or I will have $5 more? Does it overcome the effort of switching? But we think of it in a different way. It's buying your attention. It's kind of waving a hand in front of you, right? I don't want to miss out on $5 now, so I'll do this. And so micro incentives work best when either you have a one-time behavior that you need to get people to do, like sign up for an account, or you have a behavior in which if you do something once, you're likely to repeat that behavior over time. And when we looked at the data from the credit union, we saw that mobile deposits, once people started using mobile deposits, they continued to use it over time. And so this was a perfect situation to try using micro incentives, because certainly you can't be giving out $5 or giving out a lottery every time you want one of your clients to do something. And we see that it worked. So we had an initial bump with excitement, but then over time, they continued to use mobile deposits more, the people who received the intervention than not. So we had 60% more mobile deposits from the group that received this check in the mail. So the second area I'm going to talk about today is inspiring trust and confidence. And the principle is giving transparency to the process. So how can you make what you're doing even more transparent to your clients? Now, some of the research around this was done by one of our academic affiliates, Mike Norton, and his colleague at Harvard Business School, Ryan Buell. And in one of their first experiments, they created a fake travel website. So this probably looks familiar to other travel websites you've seen and used. And in one condition, they called this the blind condition. They provided a search where you can see that, as it's searching, you can see the progress bar on the top where it's moving on the top left of the screen. And so it's actually calculating and working and finding your flights, right? But in the transparent condition, it was actually showing you, as it was finding flights, it was filling in. And so it's still that progress bar, but as it was searching each airline, it was then populating the screen. This is a pretty simple intervention. But people continually found the service as more valuable the more transparent it was. So the more that they could see about the search process, the more valuable it was. And we started to see this across a lot of industries now. So, you may have noticed if you order food, there are some places that now tell you the order has been received. Your food is now being prepared. Your food is now being packaged. Your food is now out for delivery, right? And you can track it along the entire chain of events. And there are, a number of other examples like this, even with government services. So this is an example that the academics continue. They did another study in Boston. They have a website which is similar to, I know a lot of cities in Latin America have these 311 websites where citizens can go and check on how things are progressing. So this was about potholes and whether these potholes were being fixed. And you can see on the left side of the screen that how many requests were opened and how many were closed. So citizens know what the progress is that the city is making day to day. So all they did is they went in and changed. On the right, they put in little markers so you could see which potholes were open yesterday and which ones were closed. It doesn't change their progress, but it gives us insight a little bit more into what they're doing. And again, this was really effective in increasing trust and satisfaction with government. And so one of the things that we want to think about when we're designing in the financial space is, what are the visual cues that we often see in a formal institution that we're not getting when we're using a service on an app or a website or any other digital service, right? So one of the most important visual cues that we found in interviewing people is that paid stamp that goes on bills. And so working with a large bank, that we found that that was the most important cue that gave them that assurance and satisfaction and confidence. We made sure to replicate that in the online experience. And the final example I want to give today is around facilitating action. So how do we keep people moving forward? And the one that I'll talk about today is fostering a sense of progress. So as you can see here, great start, you just took the first step. So how do we keep that progress going? So all of you are probably familiar with loyalty cards. You get them for coffee, at the movie theater, bookstores. I mean, everyone seems to be handing out these loyalty cards every day, right? And you go through and you have a number of punches, and once you punch all of those, you get some small reward. Now, there was a study conducted, and in one case, they gave people a card with 8 purchases to go. And in the other card, they still had 8 purchases to go, but 2 of them were already filled in. And we see that the redemptions and the use of these loyalty cards were much greater when you have this endowed sense of progress, when I feel like I'm already involved in the process with those 2 punches. And you could probably relate to this when you think of yourself and sort of starting a new task, right? It always feels the hardest right before you start it, but once you get going, it always feels a little bit easier. And so there are other ways we can create this sense of endowed progress. So one other example is progress bars. So the top is an example of a good use of progress bars. Great, I am on step 5 of 6. I'm almost done. The bottom is an example of a progress bar you never want to use. 27 steps, oh my goodness, let me quit now, right? And so you want to think about how to frame that in a different way to help create that action all along. Now, one of the things that's been interesting in the literature lately is they've shown that instead of progress bars, what's even more effective is giving people a round circle and completing the segments in a circle. They call them pseudo sets. And it's the idea that it feels like a complete whole in a circle when you complete it. And so if you go around and complete it, you're much more likely to complete an action if it's part of a circle than a progress bar even. All right, so these are some examples of the different design principles that you can find on our checklist if you'd like to use it. And just a reminder, this is what it's titled. You can use it as an interactive checklist on our website, and you could also download it as a PDF. So thank you.